So NBC hired Rona McDaniel, Romney. Is she allowed to use Romney now that she's not working for Trump? She was the former chair to RNC. Now, look, I have real issues with how many Republicans work for MSNBC. And I have never been an employee of MSNBC. I've had a pay for appearance contract at times. I'm probably outside that contract, or maybe not. I haven't billed them for anything. I haven't been on in over a year, I think. But even then, I stopped billing them. Like, it was only a couple of times. But that was really more of a function of tough time getting a babysitter in COVID, and then I grew a beard. But there is a difference between like a Michael Steele and a Rona McDaniel. And that is Michael Steele's lies that he propagated as the chair of the RNC were sort of like within the sort of bounds of like political lying. Mm-hmm. Rona McDaniel participated in orchestrating an event that has sent many people to jail. That's like a different order of magnitude. And, you know, far be it from me to give Chuck Todd credit. It's interesting. This is where they chose to make their stand. You know, Nicole Wallace worked for George W. Bush. I think that guy was a war criminal. But here is Chuck Todd, and I think he articulates a couple of points that are, you know, interesting here. There's a lot of theories as to why NBC hired Rona McDaniel. One is like they're gearing up for the potential of a Donald Trump administration, and they want to be seen as being like fair-handed. Now, I don't know who that's for, because Trump doesn't like Rona McDaniel. But presumably, like, they think, well, if we are showing balance, I don't know what the theory is behind it.
My guess is it's going to be a Michael Steele situation where she comes on, slowly walks into Trump criticism, but supports everything else from the Republican Party. Steele was doing that. But, I mean, recently he's been saying, like, oh, Trump's the nominee. Like, he's going to be the nominee, while the rest of the other anchors were inflating Nikki Haley. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, perhaps to give some inside look into Republican voters.
Yes.
But she has no idea.
But that's voters. That's the other point.
Politicians.
She is on the outside now. Like, you know, like she was on the outside even when she was at the RNC.
Exactly.
So here is Chuck Todd, who presents that sort of notion. MSNBC has announced that they're not going to have her on the air. They have no plans to.
And there was some reporting in Politico earlier that this clip from Chuck Todd is responding that Kristen Welker interviewed Rona McDaniel prior, but it was not clear whether she was still in her active capacity in the RNC or as a paid contributor doing the interview.
So the interview was booked prior to her being hired by NBC, and then it became sort of like, oh, what do we do now? Right. But here is Chuck Todd, and he raises the point of like, what value is she bringing? And that is a really good question.
Let me deal with the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I think our bosses owe you an apology for putting you in this situation, because I don't know what to believe. She is now a paid contributor by NBC News. So I have no idea whether any answer she gave to you was because she didn't want to mess up her contract. She wants us to believe that she was speaking for the RNC when the RNC was paying for her. So she has credibility issues that she still has to deal with.
Yeah.
Is she speaking for herself, or is she speaking on behalf of who's paying her? Once at the RNC, she did say that, hey, I'm speaking for the party. I get that. That's part of the job. So what about here? I will say this. I think your interview did a good job of exposing, I think, many of the contradictions. And look, there's a reason why there's a lot of journalists at NBC News uncomfortable with this, because many of our professional dealings with the RNC over the last 6 years have been met with gaslighting, have been met with character assassination. So that's where you begin here. And so when NBC made the decision to give her NBC News' credibility, you got to ask yourself, what does she bring NBC News? And when we make deals like this, and I've been at this company a long time, you're doing it for access to audience. Sometimes it's access to an individual, and we can have a journalistic ethics debate about that. And I'm willing to have that debate. And if you told me we were hiring her as a technical advisor to the Republican convention, I think that would be certainly defensible. If you told me we're talking to her, but let's see how she does in some interviews and maybe vet her with actual journalists inside the network, see if it's a two-way, what she can bring the network. So I do think, unfortunately, this interview is always going to be looked through the prism of who is she speaking for, right? I think you did everything you could do. You got put into an impossible situation, booking this interview, and then all of a sudden the rugs pull out from under you. You find out she's being paid to show up. It's unfortunate for this program, but I am glad you did the best that you could, and that's why the three of us are on here to try to bolster that editorial independence.
Well, I'll tell you this, and I didn't pick this up in the first time I heard this, but he's nervous.
He's so nervous.
You can
Crowder.
Totally. And you know, I can understand some measure of nervousness.
Absolutely.
You're going out and you're basically inviting your bosses to fire you. Now, of course, they won't do it today. They'll do it several months from now is when it'll happen. But the real question is like, what's the value? Never mind to NBC News, but that's the sort of like the mediator, right? What's the value to the public? Like what insights is she going to bring? Like he had a good point. Like, yeah, you could bring her on as a technical advisor for the convention because she may, understand sort of like some of the inner workings of how that's working because she ran one most recently, but she's on the outs with the Trump people. She who is she providing access to? Like, what is the value of that? It really is. And CNN apparently was also like interviewing her, maybe ABC News. It's garbage. And it really reeks of like a Comcast-y type of edict. And the best part is though, is that the head of MSNBC, is it Rashida Jones? Is it? She certainly must have signed off on this. It would have been NBC News, and then CEO. I think she's CEO of MSNBC, or president maybe. She would have signed off on this. But she's also the person who now says like she's not coming on our network. So
also here's my alternate theory too, is that he doesn't host Meet the Press anymore, right? When did Chuck Todd get booted off of Meet the Press
not
for
that
Welker,
long ago, right?
He might think I don't have much to lose here.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah, like the idea where I helmed Meet the Press for a certain kind of reporter. This is like a dream come true. He's no longer there. I guess if it was a few months ago, if not a year ago, where she took over. September. 6 months. So
mess around, he might team up with Don Lemon.
Empire Strikes Back. Does he even have does he still have his daily show on MSNBC?
I think he's just like if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to double check, but I'm pretty sure he's just now, he's known as the chief political analyst, but I don't believe he has his own show anymore. I think that's just now like a roving role.
And look, they've hired people who you really like, spies. Like Brennan, who was I don't want to say a pathological liar because pathological liars lie for no reason.
Official liar to the government.
He was an official liar.
So was Jen Psaki, by the way. That's also what the White House press person does. Is they're liars for the administration? It's a level down.
Press
from being
people like Fox is hired, and,
I understand.
and people go from that. Like I get that more because they're not in a sort of real policy position, and everybody knows that's their job to present the White House position. And you saw that, like, what's her face on the Five? What's her? Who's on the
Dana Perino.
Dana Perino and Tony
and Kayleigh McEnany too. The other Trump.
Tony. what the heck was that guy's name? Tony Roberts went from Fox into the administration. I mean, Sean Hannity worked for Donald Trump while he was hosting a show virtually. I mean, I get that, but in this instance, it's pretty unique. But where were the people talking about?
How do we trust this person?
Yeah, and even like, let's say, like, Malcolm Nance. To be honest with you, like, we had him on this program. He said something to me about. It was about. Gosh, I can't remember.
Anwar al-Awlaki's kid.
Anwar al-Awlaki's kid. Something I had never heard before. That when we killed Anwar al-Awlaki's kid, that he had a gun with him or something, which not even the government made that claim. And I asked him about it. I ran into him in a green room at MSNBC. This was years and years ago. I think we had him on, I don't know, 6 years ago. I don't know what it was. And I said, hey, he said, well, you got to have me back on for my book or something like that. I think he had come out. We had him on for a book about Islam.
Yeah.
And then he had another book about Russia, I think, in the run up to the election. And I said, yeah, listen, I gotta tell you, I specifically asked Jeremy Scahill, I think I did it on air, about Anwar al-Awlaki's son. And I've asked a lot of people, and I've done a lot of research, and I've never seen a single person ever claim that this guy had a gun. I've seen, like, horrible Obama administration officials say, like, he had the wrong father, but I've never even seen this claim. And I said, like, do you have a link for this? And he's like, well, I'm not a journalist. I'm a former spy. And I'm like, I don't, how do I have you on my show again if you're saying that, like, your classification of yourself means that you don't have to substantiate what you're saying? Like, you see, that puts me in a precarious situation. And that was the end of our relationship. But the point being that this is someone who was not just lying to the press about sort of like the sort of, typical banal stuff. This is someone who actually schemed with Trump to do something that has sent people to prison.
Yep.
And at what value to the public? Like, what are we gaining from this? So, good for Chuck Todd.
I mean,
He should have, Chuck Todd wouldn't have believed what was going on 15, 20 years ago. So that's that.
It's interesting to see him look so uncomfortable.
Yeah. I have to.
Glazer up there.
You fight that sort of inclination to go like, oh, well, why being so hysterical? I mean, I remember these people.